far back as history can record, in 9600 BC, there were gay cavemen roaming the earth. In 3000 BC, there were transgender people that were so widely accepted for their gender identity that they were buried according to their gender identity, instead of their sex assigned at birth. In the Egyptian Empire, there were gay pharaohs, and in the Roman Empire, there was even a god of homosexuality named Antinous.
President Obama has been the most proactive president for LGBT people.
Key distinction between sex and gender. Someone once told me that sex is what you have between your legs and gender is what you have between your ears. So, sex is determined by your anatomy, while gender is a social construct. It has to do with how you see your body, identity, and expression.
LGBTQ+ people have always existed, even if the language seems new. Conversations around sexual orientation and gender are nuanced, and the alphabet, if you will, is expanding. The L stands for lesbian, a woman emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other women. G stands for gay, used to describe men attracted to the same sex or anyone attracted to the same or similar genders. B, bisexual, people attracted to more than one gender.
यानी ट्रांसजेंडर की। ट्रांसजेंडर एक्चुअली थर्ड जेंडर होता है, क्योंकि ये वो लोग हैं जो जब पैदा होते हैं तो उनको लड़का या लड़की मान लिया जाता है, लेकिन जब वो बड़े होते हैं तो वो उससे एकदम उलट, एकदम डिफरेंट महसूस करते हैं। यानी लड़का बड़े होके सोचता है कि वो एक्चुअली में लड़की है, और जो लड़की है वो बड़े होके सोचती है कि नहीं, वो एक्चुअली में लड़का है।
So, you might have been born female, but you see yourself as male. This is called transgender.
क्यू यानी क्वेयर की। क्वेयर यानी वो लोग जिन्हें अभी तक ये क्लियर ही नहीं है कि उनकी पहचान क्या है, वो मेल हैं, फीमेल हैं या ट्रांसजेंडर हैं। उनको तो ये भी क्लियर नहीं है कि वो किससे अट्रैक्टेड हैं, कौन उन्हें पसंद आएगा। इसलिए कभी कभी ये जो क्यू है, इसको क्वेयर के साथ साथ क्यू फॉर क्वेश्चनिंग यानी उनके मन में जो सवाल हैं उससे जोड़ के भी देखा जाता है।
In addition to the LGBT and Q, some also add the letters I and A. I stands for intersex, those born with differences in their sex traits and reproductive anatomy.
यानी इंटरसेक्स की। इंटरसेक्स उन लोगों को कहा जाता है जो जब पैदा होते हैं तो उनके जेनिटल्स यानी उनके जननांगों से ये तय नहीं हो पाता कि वो मेल हैं या फीमेल।
A or asexual are people who lack a sexual attraction or sexual interest in others.
And finally, A stands for asexual or aromantic, and it means a person is not sexually or romantically attracted to any gender, but they can still have relationships and friendships.
And then there's the plus. That leaves room for the other sexual identities and orientations not covered in the acronym. So there you have it, LGBTQIA+.
भारत में हम इस पूरे समुदाय को हिजड़ा नाम से ज़्यादा जानते हैं। हिजड़ा एक बहुत ही खास समुदाय का नाम है, जिनके अपने कायदे तौर तरीके होते हैं और एक परिवार की तरह रहते हैं, एक दूसरे का ख्याल भी रखते हैं। और हिजड़ा, अरावनी, कोथी, शिवशक्ति, जोगती हिजड़ा, हमारे देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों में ये इसी समुदाय के अलग अलग नाम हैं।
Sì, ma balla nuda. Zazza, un gran salotto. 23 mulatte. Danzan come matte. Casa di piaceri per stranieri. 130 chili. Splendida regina. Rum e cocaina. Zazza, se sarò cortese, ti farò vedere. Nella pelle bruna, una zanna bianca come la luna.
Of the greatest people who have ever lived were members of our community, including Abraham Lincoln, Alexander Hamilton, Leonardo da Vinci, Sir Francis Bacon, Aubrey Beardsley, Charles Demuth, Oscar Wilde, Michelangelo, and more. Another gay man named George Washington played politics and became the first president of the United States.
Post-World War I America saw a nice rise in the economy, because that's usually what happens post-war if you're America. The 20s brought an age of what a lot of people like to call a sort of sexual liberation. Women's increased visibility in the workplace changed how society viewed them. In 1920, women in America were victorious in fighting for the right to vote. Over time, women in the 20s experimented with traditionally masculine gender roles. They enjoyed flapper culture and sexual liberation, and shorter hair. Lesbian subculture was beginning to form. Cities were gaining people in the millions, and diversity in the American population was as present as ever. Mass culture through media was on the rise, and queer identities and its presence in American culture was on the rise as well. Hollywood, since this is before the Hays Code, or the Censoring Motion Picture Code of America, looked for shocking ways to get the general audiences to watch films. They tried to use queerness as a gimmick to get people to watch. The effeminate man was here for laughs, the butch woman for snickers. The Women's Army Corps provided opportunity for many women to do so-called men's work, and take on traditionally masculine roles. This attracted many queer and gender non-conforming women for the chance to meet other women like them. Henry Gerber. Henry Gerber was a German immigrant to the United States. He was sent to a mental institution for being gay, and after leaving, fought in World War I for the United States. He decided to start the Society for Human Rights here in America, the first homophile institution in the United States. It is important to note for being the first queer organization in the United States. In many ways, the 1920s and 30s marked the beginning of a visible LGBTQ+ presence in the Western world. Berlin, Germany had a vast culture of queer people, including several gay bars, queer movies, and LGBTQ+ publications. There was a similar era in the United States during the sexual liberation of the 20s. However, economic depression and worldwide conflict would soon bring an end to the presence of queer culture. Although homosexuality was legal for a time in places like Poland and the Soviet Union, the world was headed for a dark place, where freedoms were being restricted by the rise of fascism and dictatorships in Europe. the United States remained isolationist, focusing on helping itself in the Depression as President Roosevelt worked on his New Deal policy. Queer history was still being made, but it was being silenced by the forces of society. The Great Depression hit around 1929 and people began to lose track of LGBTQ rights. Religion spread to keep public morale, and the Hays Code acted as a brutal censor on the motion picture industry in America. The queer movement was silenced for decades, but as America entered the Second World War and found a place on the world stage, we'll find where the post-war boom takes the culture, and how mass culture and conformity prompted thousands of youth to rebel. Fascism and dictatorships took over Europe in the 30s and 40s. The Nazi Party in Germany had severe restrictions on all freedoms, and especially those concerning LGBTQ+ rights. Thousands of queer people were arrested under the Nazi regime, and were sent to prison or concentration camps, where several met their end. Under Stalin's Russia, homosexuality was recriminalized in the 1930s, and in Spain, recriminalized in the 40s. Japan, as it grew to become a player on the world stage, encouraged its citizens to participate in strict roles and loyalty to the government. Although homosexuality was technically legal, it still had stigma against breaking the usual roles that were expected in society, especially in a time when they were allies with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The world was heading towards war, and World War II would become a catalyst for queer people to know each other's presence. The world was a muddy place, and many countries and cultures did what they could to promote unity and nationalism. However, this was often at the expense of the outliers. Pearl Harbor initiated the United States entry into the war, officially at least. Men were expected to fight, and women expected to work. On a larger scale than what had happened in the First World War, women's roles in society were changing. Women in the United States experienced a societal autonomy they were not used to experiencing. The war ended the economic depression in the United States, and brought on an age of nationalism, conformity, and strict gender roles. But in this post-war age came the rebels, those trying to dissect their society. In 1948, the Kinsey Report was published, and society's conformist lens began to crack. It was the end of the bloodiest war in history. Entire cities were demolished, and too often, the hope of the LGBT+ community was too. In Germany, queer people in concentration camps were often required to continue their sentences. Those jailed for homosexuality under the Nazi regime were still viewed as criminals. Two economies, two atomic powers, two different political systems remained intact after the war. The United States and the USSR became the two world superpowers. However, shared in their distaste for queer people. Under Stalin's Russia, homosexuality remained a crime, and was often conflated with pedophilia and fascism. Rather than seeing queer people as a palette of political ideologies and identities, queerness, and any challenge to the status quo, became associated with the enemy.
Danger of the Communist Party.
The United States entered an era of prosperity, at least for some people. The economic boom that came after the war prompted marginalized groups to ask, "Where's our paradise?" People of color, in an attempt to escape the segregation of the South, had moved to the cities in the North. As a result, the affluent society moved to the suburbs, a phenomenon called white flight. The suburbs became the epitome of what the so-called normal family looked like. A white husband and wife, 2.5 kids, a dog named Spot, and a white picket fence. The media perpetuated the idea of the nuclear family, and the culture reinforced the ideal of conformity. Television replaced radio as the dominant form of media. The story of American society, if told by the mass media post-war, would be sexism, whiteness, gender roles, and straightness. But even in the suburbs, there was an unspoken awareness of sexuality that remained silent. The Kinsey Reports, published in 1948, allowed for the suburban household to become aware of the people nobody talked about. At the time, the report was controversial for being open about homosexuality. In fact, stating that 10% of the population was gay. It openly talked about the issues of sexuality, an issue that many people kept quiet about, and thus queerness suddenly became an American talking point. Although queer identities were still highly stigmatized, the sudden awareness of queer people plants the seeds of acceptance into the public's minds. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon. Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon are a lesbian couple. They founded the lesbian rights group, the Daughters of Bilitis, and the lesbian publication, The Ladder. Their organizations were one of the first LGBT+ organizations in the US, and joined the National Organization for Women in order to push for the intersectionality of lesbian and women's issues. The roles of different groups are changing. The roles of people of color, women, and even youth. The LGBT community felt like a new world was on the horizon. Were greatly influential, but it is the mixing of these two elements, mostly aimed at gay white men, believed in assimilation. Around the world, queer people were gaining an exposure that they had not experienced before. All of a sudden, societies and places were acknowledging their existence. Laws were starting to accept them. Literary figures were writing about their experiences. Movie stars were beginning to be open about themselves. And rather than being looked upon with a judgmental eye, suddenly people were trying to understand the experiences of queer people. Queer writers and activists were trying to bring out their stories, and some people started to listen. The 60s would bring on a new age. The sexual revolution was on the edge of tipping. Civil rights marches boomed across the country. And soon, the community would find its own place in the social revolution of the 60s. Greenwich Village, USA.
Greenwich Village saw a surge in population in the 1960s.
The village was the place of poets, writers, black turtlenecks, and smoke-filled lounges. While the media pushed conformity, segments of America pushed for change.
Stonewall Inn opened in 1966, selling watered-down drinks and bribes to local police. The homeless and impoverished queer youth of Christopher Street found a home. Raids were frequent at Stonewall, but usually things ended easily. Bribes were given, and everything went back to normal. But this night was somehow different. The police would usually round up the patrons, taking those who were feminine presenting and asking for their IDs. But the patrons refused. As resistant patrons were rounded up into police vehicles, a crowd of 100 people were gathered outside, and tension rose in the air. Suddenly, violence broke out. The queens, gay men, lesbians, and trans patrons began a violent backlash against the police. Notable trans women and drag queens like Marsha P. Johnson stood at the front lines, escalating the uprising. As the night continued, kick lines formed, singing "We Are the Stonewall Girls." Craig Rodwell, a longtime activist and owner of the Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookshop, saw the riots from his window and wanted to make sure this riot was not lost among the numerous other LGBT+ riots. He called local papers, making sure the event was gaining coverage. This ensured that the second night would bring more attendance. Papers like the New York Post and the New York Times covered the riots. The walls of Stonewall were covered in written words like "gay power." Hundreds of bystanders turned into thousands.
Mark Siegel was 18 when he moved away from his family in 1969 and came to Greenwich Village, a well-known bohemian district in New York City.
When I was 18 years old, I knew I was gay, but I didn't even know what the right word for it was. And that was one of my hangouts, Stonewall. I would usually go to the end of the bar, and that's where my friends, street kids, drag queens, would hang out.
Most Stonewall customers were regularly harassed by the police.
We were second, third, fourth class citizens, but this place, allowed us to be here. We could be arrested out on the street, so this was safe.
On June 28, 1969, Mark had been in New York just 6 weeks.
So that night, I was in the bar, and all of a sudden, the lights started flickering on and off. I looked over the person next to me, I said, "What's going on?" And they were casual. They said, "Oh, just another raid." That set off alarm bells inside me. I was nervous as hell, and the police had no use for me. They're going after the drag queens. They're throwing insults around. But me, they just carted me and let me out. And I was glad to get out of the bar.
When Mark got outside, a small crowd was gathered around the entrance.
People were sort of applauding when someone got out. People started saying things to the police as the door would open. And the most vocal and loudest were the drag queens. They had nothing to lose.
Stand up stronger.
Everything society could take away from you had already taken away from them. This was their home.
Power gonna raise it up.
Somebody threw something at the door. Ruckus started. Police came out of the door chasing somebody. Then they went inside because they felt endangered. The police barricaded themselves inside the bar. Basically, all hell broke loose.
By the time police reinforcements arrived, Christopher Street had filled with several hundred people.
Police came out. People dispersed. People ran down that street. They ran up various other streets. Bleecker Street, Gay Street. They just were all over here. It was one of the greatest nights in the history for gay people.
Stonewall riots in 1969, I think, obviously it was a very pivotal point in our history.
Stonewall is not important because of the fires, the bricks, or the shot glasses. It was important because it made queer people believe that they could have a voice. The Stonewall riots pushed the community to organize and demand their rights. Movements sprung for women's liberation and sexual liberation. Although there were great strides in the name of progress, some felt like it was not enough, like they were being left out. In the 1970s was a tumultuous time for America. It was a revolution after a decade of change, with the various civil rights movements of the 1960s having achieved a great deal of legislative success. Christopher Street Liberation Day. Thus a march to commemorate Stonewall began on June 28, 1970. The tradition of pride parades began to remember the night of spontaneity that turned into a movement. The first pride parade was held in 1970 and was initially called Christopher Street Liberation Day. The event was organized by Craig Rodwell and intended to be a commemoration of the Stonewall riots. These acts of solidarity and celebrations of queerness spread around the country. In the 70s and LGBT activism were defined by the queer community discovering itself. They came together to form organizations, communities, stores, bookshops, and even churches. There were several new political goals of the movements, some of which included repealing sodomy laws, decriminalizing homosexuality, repealing what they called anti-cross-dressing laws, ending employment discrimination, and ending harassment by police of LGBT spaces. These political goals stressed the community's desire for liberation. They wanted to be able to be out and proud and not face legal punishment. Sylvia Rivera took to the stage to proclaim her concerns.
Y'all better quiet down. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all? Think about that. The people that are trying to do something for all of us and not men and women that belong to a white middle class, white club. And that's what you all belong to. Revolution now!
This is the Castro District, a small neighborhood nestled in the middle of San Francisco. It wasn't always speckled with rainbows, walks, and monuments. It was once a simple working-class neighborhood, but as many things did in the 60s, that changed. The Castro District became the new home of many LGBT wanderers of the 60s and 70s. Harvey Milk was one of the many gay men who fled to San Francisco in the 1970s. He was aware of the rising gay political scene in the Castro District. This wasn't his first encounter with gay politics, however. He had been exposed to activism in New York through his relationship with Craig Rodwell. Now, back to San Francisco. It was election night, 1977, and after 3 failed campaigns, Harvey Milk was elected. The first openly gay man in California to be elected to public office, urging all queer people to come out of the closet. he began his own Democratic club, the San Francisco Gay Democratic Club. This was its statement. No decisions which affect our lives should be made without the gay voice being heard. We want our fair share of city services. We want openly gay people appointed and elected to city offices. People who reflect the diversity of our community. We want the schools of San Francisco to provide full exposure to and positive appreciation of gay lifestyles. We are asking no more than we deserve. We will not settle for less. On November 27, 1978, shortly after the defeat of the Briggs Initiative, Harvey Milk was assassinated by Dan White, a fellow councilman. Harvey Milk showed the community how to hope, how to come out and to be united. The following decade would prove to be one of the most challenging for the LGBTQ+ community, and Harvey Milk showed us ways to cope.
I know that you cannot live on hope alone, but without it, life is not worth living. And you gotta give them hope. Thank you very much.
President Obama has been the most proactive president for LGBT people in America. There is no second place.
Actually mentioned Stonewall. That never happened before. Stonewall is now historically given like a definitive place.
We, the people, we cannot walk alone. To hear a king proclaim that our individual freedom is inextricably bound to the freedom of every soul on earth.
Hi everybody, the Stonewall Inn. Back in 1969, as a turbulent decade was winding down, the Stonewall Inn was a popular gathering place for New York City's LGBT community. At the time, being gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender was considered obscene, illegal, even a mental illness. One night, police raided the bar and started arresting folks. Raids like these were nothing new, but this time the patrons had had enough. So they stood up and spoke out. The riots became protests. The protests became a movement. The movement ultimately became an integral part of America. Today, all Americans are protected by a hate crimes law that includes sexual orientation and gender identity. Don't ask, don't tell is history. Insurance companies can no longer turn you away because of who you are. Transgender Americans are more visible than ever, helping to make our nation more inclusive and welcoming for all. And so this week, I'm designating the Stonewall National Monument as the newest addition to America's national park system. Stonewall will be our first national monument to tell the story of the struggle for LGBT rights.
Pride Month is celebrated by millions around the world, with parades, lectures, parties, workshops, and concerts. It is also a time to honor those LGBTQ individuals who have been lost to crimes motivated by bigotry, and advocate for those in the over 70 countries who are still persecuted for who they are, some with the threat of execution. While Pride events occur year-round, Pride Month is an opportunity to celebrate the LGBTQ people who have changed the course of history, to promote visibility of LGBTQ individuals in the fabric of society, and to continue the dialogue about LGBTQ rights as human rights and the struggle for equal rights that continues around the world today.
clean. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. My mama told me when I was young, we're all born superstars. There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, she said, 'cause he made you perfect, babe. There's nothing left to say. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause I make no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't hurt yourself and regret, just love yourself instead. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way, born this way. Oh, there ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way.
It's globally one of the biggest Pride weekends of the year, with large crowds gathering in major cities to celebrate. Check this out in San Francisco. It's the world's largest Pride laser, stretching more than 4 miles or 6.5 kilometers. Many other parades, including in New York and Chicago, are also happening this weekend. Further south in Mexico, a big celebration in Mexico City this weekend. Thousands dressed in colorful and glittery costumes took to the streets for their Pride parade. Over in France, thousands more packed the streets of Paris. This parade follows a number of others in some of the smaller French cities. Organizers say the focus this year is to protest against homophobic and transphobic violence. Over in Singapore, the first Pride rally took place since a ban on gay sex was lifted last year. Back in Canada, our country's largest city is also celebrating, as people from across North America are in Toronto for the weekend's festivities. By the time it's all said and done, organizers are expecting the head count to hit a record 2.7 million people.
What's up, guys? I'm Keegle Weagle. We're back on 6th Street celebrating Pride Month the only way we know how, watching hot girls make out. Give you guys a flag if you kiss. That was so hot. Oh my gosh.
We're gonna find some girls that we can kiss today. Okay, so we're celebrating Pride this month. Yes, we are celebrating Pride. 2, 3. You can do it, you can do it. Yes! We're just on the spectrum.
On the streets of Thailand's capital Bangkok, a sea of colour at the city's LGBTQ Pride Parade. More than 50,000 people were in attendance. Many were calling for the legalization of same-sex marriage.
แต่วันนี้ค่ะเรามาแสดงให้เห็นว่าพวกเราชาว LGBT หรือว่าทุกเพศทุกวัยนะคะเราต้องการความหลากหลายและความเท่าเทียมและความเสมอภาคทางด้านกฎหมายนั่นเองค่ะคุณพี่ขา
Diversity here is not a weakness, but diversity here is strength, and as you can see over here.
Events around LGBTQ Pride Month are a reminder of the ongoing fight for equality. But at this year's parade in Bangkok, there was much optimism that landmark changes may be on the horizon in Thailand. James Lin and James Chater for Taiwan Plus.
จริงผมหวังว่างานนี้มันน่าจะเป็นเหมือนเป็นหยดน้ำหยดหนึ่งที่หยดลงไปแล้วมีคลื่น
Like I've attended every Delhi Pride in last 8 years, and then after 3 years it's happening. So very happy, and it has to happen, right? I mean, it's time that we come out as always and raise our voices, because Pride is just not a celebration; it is also a protest, right? It is a very political statement going out to the government that there's a large community in play and their rights needs to be met, and we need to be heard equally. Decriminalization has only targeted one aspect of it, but there's a larger aspect where the rights are still not there with the LGBTQ community. So we need to really focus on those rights, like inheriting properties together, opening bank accounts.
Pride Parade, the second year right here at ABC 7.
So happy to be here, and just it is such a privilege to be able to live.
If you feel real good, feel like everybody know you should put your hands up. If you feel real nice, if you feel that
we love you, we respect you, we care about you.
Nobody in the world celebrates Pride like our city.
Overwhelming, and it's just, my heart's full. It's so beautiful to be out here with everyone.
Australia's an inclusive country, and there are benefits for our economy. There are benefits, most importantly though, for the people of Australia, and that everyone should be respected for who they are. And tonight's a celebration of that, and it's a great example of what an amazing country this is.
Shalom Kulam, we are here in Tel Aviv celebrating the biggest Pride Parade in the Middle East. We are going to take you guys behind the scenes to speak to some of the crowd members and to speak to some of the largest players in the LGBT community here in Israel.
Israel, it's fucking liberal. Don't listen to what they say. Israel is a fucking heaven for gay people.
We celebrate ourselves, we celebrate love, we celebrate people.
Everybody, I am here backstage with Miss Nona Shalon.
Hello, happy Pride.
Happy Pride! Boom!
Hello, Erica, Genderica, Hysterica. Miss America. I thought that there would be less people, but there are a lot of people, a lot of Israelis that are marching and supporting us.
I want to say that Tel Aviv is the most amazing city in the world. I think that the pride in Tel Aviv, and I've been everywhere, it's the most beautiful pride all over the world.
Organizers say around 10,000 people registered to take part. It included many young people wearing colorful clothing.
I hope everyone here today enjoys being who you are and showing your own colors.
Japanese lawmakers have been trying to fast-track a bill to promote understanding of LGBTQ people.
Around 2,000 people turned out for a gay parade in Tokyo on April 24th. The march took place for the first time in 3 years due to the coronavirus pandemic.
とにかく歩けるのが嬉しいです。もう待ちに待っていたこの日なので。
Sydney World Pride has ended in spectacular fashion, with 50,000 people marching across the Harbour Bridge as the sun rose behind them. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was among the marchers, representing an acknowledgement of the past and the promise of the future.
The Sydney Harbour Bridge was closed to normal Sunday traffic as 50,000 people were led across behind the Pride flag. A spectacular sight from the air, even more impressive from the ground. This was Sydney on show, the final day of World Pride, all nationalities welcome, especially if they aren't at home. From our leader,
we have come a long way, there's more to go, but what a great celebration this is.
LGBTQ rights movement, and highlights LGBTQ rights as human rights. The movement reached a milestone in 2015 when the United States Supreme Court recognized the rights of same-sex couples to marry.
और ऐसी एक दिलचस्प शख्सियत हैं गज़ल। गज़ल ने अपनी इंजीनियरिंग की पढ़ाई की, उसके बाद इन्फोसिस में कई साल भी काम किया, लेकिन आज वो हमारी फिल्म इंडस्ट्री में बतौर लेखक काम करती हैं।
जी।
लेकिन एक वक्त था बचपन में जब आप बहुत सारे संघर्ष से, स्ट्रगल से गुजर रही थी।
जी।
क्या उसके बारे में आप हमें बताना चाहेंगी?
तो हुआ ये था कि मेरा जन्म एक गलत शरीर में हुआ था। तो मैं एक लड़के के शरीर में पैदा हुई थी।
जब आप पैदा हुई थी तो आप एक लड़का थी?
जी जी। लेकिन मैंने कभी भी अंदर से अपने आप को लड़का महसूस किया ही नहीं। जो भी छोटी छोटी चीज़ें भी मुझे अच्छी लगती थी, सब लड़कियों की तरह थी।
जी।
मेरी ज़्यादातर दोस्त लड़कियां थीं। मुझे उनके साथ घर घर खेलना अच्छा लगता था। मम्मी के कपड़े में जब वो जाती थी घर से तो मैं मम्मी के कपड़े पहन लेती थी, उनके दुपट्टे के साथ खेलती थी। तो
किस उम्र में आपको ये चीज़ें समझ में आने लगी? क्योंकि बच्चा जब बहुत छोटा होता है तो ये सारी चीज़ें शायद उसको एहसास ना हो।
आप मान लीजिए 5 साल की उम्र से।
जी जी। आपको मैं देखता हूँ तो मुझे आप लड़की नज़र आती हैं।
जी।
तो जब आप बोलती हैं आप 5 साल की, तो मैं अपने माइंड में लड़की इमेजिन करता हूँ। हम लोग को इमेजिन करना है कि 5 साल की थी गज़ल, उस वक्त लड़का थी।
जी।
उस उम्र में ये वाक़या हुआ आपके साथ।
जी।
और आपकी आंटी ने आपको उस वक्त मारा।
जी।
तो उस वक्त आपको क्या महसूस हुआ?
उस वक्त पहली बार मुझे ये समझ में आया कि जो मैं अपने आप को समझ रही हूँ वो मैं दूसरों की नज़र में नहीं हूँ, कि कुछ गड़बड़ है मेरे शरीर में और मेरे आत्मा में। मेरी आत्मा का जो लिंग था, जेंडर था, वो मेरे शरीर के जेंडर से बिल्कुल ऑपोजिट था,
अलग था।
और ये बात बहुत धीरे धीरे और समझ में आती गई जैसे मैं और बड़ी होती गई।
जी।
लेकिन किसी को भी मैं बहुत देर तक ये बता नहीं पाई। डर और ज़्यादा इसलिए भी लगता था क्योंकि स्कूल में सब बहुत चिढ़ाते थे, मुझे नाम बुलाते थे, कोई छक्का बोलता था। क्योंकि मेरे हाव भाव थोड़े फेमिनिन थे हमेशा,
लड़कियों की तरह थे, इसलिए
मुसीबत ये थी कि मुझे पता था कि मुझे इन्हें कंट्रोल करना है, मुझे अपने आप को ज़्यादा लड़कियों जैसा नहीं दिखाना है, क्योंकि लोग मजाक उड़ाते थे वरना।
जी।
तो मैं अपनी पहचान को और दबाने की खुद ही कोशिश करती थी। तो एक तरह से एक कैद थी वो, हर रोज़, हर मिनट, हर जीता सेकंड एक जेल में थी मैं।
फिर आपने पहली दफ़ा कब किसी से इसके बारे में जिक्र किया या बातचीत हुई?
मैं कुछ 13-14 साल की थी। पापा से मैंने उस दिन सब कुछ पहली बार बताया था और जाहिर सी बात है उन्हें एकदम से समझ नहीं आया। उन्होंने कहा मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा है कि एक लड़का कैसे एक लड़की की तरह महसूस कर सकता है। पर उन्होंने कहा कि मैं फिर भी ये नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि मुझे प्रॉब्लम नहीं लग रही है तो ये प्रॉब्लम है नहीं तुम्हारे लिए। मैं समझने की कोशिश करूँगा, लेकिन ये शायद एक दौर हो, एक फेज़ हो जो निकल जाएगा। लेकिन फिर बड़े होते होते जब मैं 16 साल की हुई, वैसे भी एक टीनेज होती है, आप अपने आसपास और लोगों को देखते हैं, किसी का रोमांस हो रहा है, लोग डेट पे जा रहे हैं और क्लास में रिलेशनशिप्स बन रहे हैं, और मुझे लग रहा था कि मैं हमेशा अकेली रहूँगी, कि मेरी लाइफ में कभी भी ये नहीं आएगा। सो मैं काफ़ी ज़्यादा डिप्रेस्ड थी और पढ़ाई नहीं कर पा रही थी। मैंने उन्हें बताया वही प्रॉब्लम है, वो फेज़ गुजरा नहीं, वो ख़त्म नहीं हुआ, मुझे लगता है कभी ख़त्म होगा भी नहीं। तो उन्होंने कहा हम समझते हैं, तुम हमसे बात तो किया करो, तुमने उसके बाद कभी बात नहीं की। तो हमें लगा शायद सब ठीक है। ये इतना बड़ा सपोर्ट रहा है मेरी लाइफ में, मेरे माँ बाप का, जो मैं मतलब शब्दों में मैं बयान नहीं कर सकती उसको।
जी।
फिल्म्स में काम करने का जो मेरा सपना था बचपन से, तो इसलिए मैंने मैसूर छोड़ा और मैं मुंबई आई। यहाँ पे मैंने जेवियर्स कॉलेज में फिल्म मेकिंग का कोर्स किया। उस कोर्स के दौरान हमें एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री फिल्म बनानी थी, तो मैंने डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाई इसी विषय पर, जेंडर आइडेंटिटी के ऊपर। उस फिल्म की रिसर्च के लिए मैं बहुत से और लोगों से मिली जो या तो इस सफ़र से गुजर रहे थे या गुजर चुके थे। उनसे पूछा कि उन्होंने कैसे क्या किया, क्या मेडिकल प्रोसीजर फॉलो किया। तो वो सब बात करके मुझे लगा कि ये मुश्किल है पर नामुमकिन नहीं है, और शायद अब मेरी ज़िंदगी में भी ये वक्त आ गया है। फाइनली जब मैं वो फिल्म लेकर घर गई, पटियाला गई, और मम्मी पापा को दिखाई, भाई को दिखाई, जब हमने फिल्म ख़त्म हुई तो उन्होंने मेरी तरफ मुड़ के देखा और कहे तो फिर तुम कब कर रहे हो?
तो फिर तुम कब कराना चाहती हो ये ऑपरेशन?
वो टर्निंग पॉइंट था। उसके बाद मुझे पीछे मुड़ के नहीं देखना पड़ा, और मैंने एक लंबा सा ईमेल लिख के मैंने अपने सब दोस्तों, सब रिश्तेदारों, सब पहचान वालों को बताया कि आपको मेरे बारे में ये सच नहीं मालूम, और असल में मैं एक लड़की हूँ।
अंदर से मैं एक लड़की हूँ, शरीर मैंने लड़के का पाया है।
जी।
तो अब मैं अपने शरीर को भी बदलने जा रही हूँ।
जी। मुझे सबसे बड़ी खुशी इस बात की है कि उनमें से किसी ने भी, जो भी लोग मेरी ज़िंदगी में इम्पोर्टेंट थे, कोई भी छूटा नहीं। सब उस ज़िंदगी से मेरे साथ इस ज़िंदगी में मेरे साथ आए हैं।
इस सब के बाद जब फाइनली आपका ऑपरेशन कंप्लीट हुआ और आपको पहली दफ़ा लगा कि हाँ अब मेरे पास शरीर वही है जो मैं हमेशा चाहती थी, जो मेरी आत्मा थी, अब मेरा शरीर भी वही है, तो क्या लगा आपको? क्या महसूस हुआ? क्या फील हुआ?
सर्जरी के बाद जब नर्स ने पट्टी खोलकर बताया, दिखाया, तो वो हैरान थी मेरा रिएक्शन देखकर। वो बोली कि दूसरी लड़कियां तो उछलने कूदने लगती हैं, बहुत खुश हो जाती हैं, लेकिन मैं बहुत बहुत शांत महसूस कर रही थी। मुझे लग रहा था कि यही तो होना चाहिए था, यही तो सही है। इसमें क्या है? एक्साइटमेंट नहीं था, वो पीस था कि जो रूह है वो पहली बार शरीर के साथ। हाँ,
पहली दफा आपको शांति महसूस हुई?
जी, बहुत ज़्यादा शांति। मुझे हर रोज़ ऐसा लगता है जैसे एक गिफ्ट है, एक तोहफा है। मुझे हर रोज़ मैं आज़ाद महसूस करती हूँ। जेल खत्म हो गई है।
अभी आपकी जिंदगी शुरू हुई है।
अभी शुरू हुई है, अभी शुरू हुई है।
अब आपको लोग देखते हैं, बहुत सारे लड़के देखते होंगे, दे मस्ट बी फाइंडिंग यू अट्रैक्टिव। हाउ डू यू फील?
वो अटेंशन मुझे लगता है बहुत बड़ी बात है मेरे लिए। मुझे ऑब्वियसली अच्छा लगता है। कई लोग जब इस बारे में जानते हैं तो कई लोग ऐसा सोच लेते हैं कि अच्छा इसने सेक्स इसलिए चेंज करा होगा ताकि ये लड़कों के साथ रिलेशनशिप कर सके। ये गलतफहमी मैं चाहती हूँ लोगों की दूर हो, क्योंकि वो मैंने इसलिए नहीं किया कि मुझे किसी और से प्यार हो, वो मैंने इसलिए किया क्योंकि मुझे अपने आप से प्यार करना था।
देखिए, जब माँ बाप स्वीकार करते हैं तो उसके साथ साथ आसपास के लोग भी एक्सेप्ट कर लेते हैं जब माँ बाप एक्सेप्ट करते हैं। इसलिए मेरे लिए आप दोनों इतने बड़े हीरोज हैं। मेरी दुआ है कि सारे बच्चों को आप जैसे माँ बाप मिलें। डॉक्टर अंजलि एक साइकियाट्रिस्ट हैं। डॉक्टर अंजलि, हमें बताइए कि क्या होमोसेक्सुअल होना या गे या लेस्बियन होना या बाइसेक्सुअल या ट्रांसजेंडर होना, क्या ये कोई बीमारी है, कोई डिजीज है?
बिल्कुल नहीं, ये बिल्कुल बीमारी नहीं है, ये कुदरती है।
तो पैदाइशी ये है?
बिल्कुल। और इसमें कोई किसी की गलती नहीं है कि बच्चा ऐसा है।
बच्चे की गलती नहीं है, ना माँ बाप की गलती है।
बिल्कुल ना।
ऐसा नहीं है कि माँ बाप ने कुछ गलती की है, उसको परवरिश में कोई गलती हुई है, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है।
ऐसा कुछ नहीं है।
फिर भी बहुत सारे माँ बाप को लगता है कि ये एक बीमारी है और वो फिर बच्चे को डॉक्टर के पास ले जाते हैं ताकि उसका इलाज हो। तो उसके लिए आपको क्या कहना है?
देखिए, अगर मैं आपको कहती हूँ कि आज से अब लड़कियों की तरफ मत देखिए और लड़कों की तरफ सेक्सुअली देखिए, क्या आप कर सकेंगे?
नहीं, मैं नहीं कर पाऊंगा।
तो अगर आप नहीं कर पाएंगे तो फिर हम कैसे सोच सकते हैं कि वो लड़का या वो लड़की कर पाएगी?
जी।
तो जैसे हेट्रोसेक्सुअल होमोसेक्सुअल नहीं बन सकता, वैसे होमोसेक्सुअल हेट्रोसेक्सुअल नहीं बन सकता,
तो
क्योंकि ये बीमारी ही नहीं है, ये एक कुदरती है। तो आप उसे चेंज कैसे कर सकेंगे?
तो इसमें हमें कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है?
बिल्कुल नहीं। देखिए, पहले बात है कि होमोसेक्सुअल भी नॉर्मल इंसान ही होते हैं।
हाँ, हम सब नॉर्मल हैं।
हम सब नॉर्मल होते हैं। और अगर हमारा बच्चा किसी होमोसेक्सुअल के साथ दोस्ती करेगा, वो होमोसेक्सुअल नहीं बन जाएगा। तो ये कोई आपको कह नहीं सकता है, कोई आपको इन्फ्लुएंस नहीं कर सकता। पहली बात ये है कि ये चीज़ कोई सोच के 1 या 2 दिन में ये चीज़ आके बताता नहीं है अपने माँ बाप को। लोगों को सालों साल लग जाते हैं, क्योंकि उन्हें ऐसे लगता है कि पेरेंट्स अगर स्वीकार नहीं करेंगे तो हमारा क्या होगा और उनका क्या होगा। तो अगर बच्चे ने हिम्मत जुटाई है आपको बोलने के लिए, तो आप आराम से उसकी बात सुनिए और फिर ये चीज़ को स्वीकार कीजिए और फिर उसे कहिए कि हम आपके साथ हैं,
हम आपको सपोर्ट करेंगे।
हम आपको
क्योंकि पेरेंट्स का सपोर्ट बहुत जरूरी है, वरना अगर पेरेंट्स ही बच्चों को सपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे तो बच्चा और टूट जाता है। वैसे भी वो डरा हुआ है।
बिल्कुल। इनफैक्ट क्या होता है, अगर आप उसे डराएंगे, धमकाएंगे, फिर वो बच्चा आपसे दूर चला जाता है और वो अपने आप की खोज में कितने सारे गलत काम करता है, ड्रग्स लेना शुरू करता है, घर से भाग जाता है, अपने आप को मारने की कोशिश करता है। अगर आपका बच्चा, उसकी सेक्सुअलिटी कुछ भी हो, आप उसे सपोर्ट कीजिए और जितना प्यार आप देंगे उतना आपके बच्चे के साथ रिलेशनशिप और अच्छी हो जाएगी।
डॉक्टर अंजलि, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया हमसे बातचीत करने का और इस बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण मुद्दे पर रोशनी डालने का। थैंक यू सो मच।
People who discriminate against the LGBTQ+ community can be described as homophobic. Homophobia also includes prejudice, fear, or hatred towards people, and that hurts them. Homophobia causes mental health problems among the queer community. It's also why many people remain closeted, meaning they haven't told anyone they're queer. Education is a major way to combat homophobia. People are often afraid of what they don't understand, and this kind of ignorance is the cause of hatred and intolerance. If people understand who the LGBTQ+ community is made of, they'll be able to realize that everyone just wants to love and be loved. After all, that's what makes us human.